Hello everyone, this episode is going to be about the Remington 1903 Springfield and the Remington 1903 Modified. These are transitional models from the original design to the 03A3 design. This is kind of like an in-betweener, I would say, where it still has a lot of the original characteristics, but it clearly doesn't have the finger grooves in the stock, but it still has the original nice stocks because these are actually from the Rock Island Arsenal. What happened is Remington was originally supposed to make weapons for the British and adapt the 1903 to the 303 cartridge. But what happened is they end up leasing the equipment to make the Remington 1903. And then as the war progressed for World War II, they simplified the rifle design. And these are kind of like a transitional model that's pretty rare. There's only like 350,000 of these models in existence. So the numbers are kind of in question for the 1903 Modified, 214, 231, but the original Remington 1903, 133,444. So this one is actually pretty rare. This is towards the end of the serial number range. This is 312. This is 315. So this is the beginning of the 1903 Modified. But a lot of the changes listed here in the collector's book aren't going to be until April or further. So this is actually a May serial number receiver from 1942. So a lot of those changes you won't see. This still has all the nice milled parts, and this stock, I believe, is a replacement because it doesn't have the inspector's initials, but it does have a proof mark. So that makes me think it's been replaced. And this one's clearly an Arsenal rebuild. It's got all the Arsenal stamps, and it's got a high standard barrel. Even though High Standard did make the barrels, if it's marked High Standard, it's a replacement barrel. Kind of confusing, I know. Let's go over more individually. Starting with the original 1903 by Remington, this is actually a pretty rare model, and it's in pretty good condition, albeit it's an Arsenal rebuild. So what's cool is it has the inspector's initials that you can see, and you can see the Arsenal stamps as well. But this one clearly has a Rock Island stamp as well, which is cool because these rifle stock blanks and the tooling to make the Remington 1903 and the 1903 Modified came from Rock Island. So this is a pretty cool model. Even though it's an Arsenal rebuild, you see the stock is in pretty good condition. That's one of the things that's part of the transition, is the stock is still pretty nice, but it doesn't have the finger grooves. But everything else is pretty much the same. It has the milled parts. It has the ladder sight here instead of the rear aperture sight, the 03A3. They started to go to using steel instead of brass. So brass stripper clips, steel stripper clips. I do have an original old sword bayonet here for reference because it's the same lug pattern here, because the original ones from 1903 to 1906 were the rod and bayonet. And then they have this different type of style here that attaches. This is a pretty big package and pretty heavy when you have it all together, but it is pretty nice. I do like these leather slings once you figure out how to, put it together the right way. But this is a good example of the tooling that Rock Island used, or Remington used from Rock Island, and the rifle stock blanks that they got from Rock Island, because it is a really good quality. The action is really smooth. This one is towards the end of the serial numbers for the original 1903. This one's like 312, and it goes to the 1903 Modified, begins at like 313 and change. So it's not exact, only approximate, but you'll see this one is an Arsenal rebuild. It has a High Standard barrel instead of a Remington barrel. Even though High Standard made the barrels, it should be an RA with the flaming bomb, and it should say 1941 or 42 instead of December of 1944. So unfortunately, it's an Arsenal rebuild and it's not original, but it's an extremely nice quality, and the barrel still has plenty of life in it. This is my 1903 Modified. Now it's not going to look a whole lot different than the 1903 Remington I have. Obviously the stock, the finish is a little bit different, but everything else looks the same. The only difference is this one has the original barrel. So this one you can see will say RA with the flaming bomb, May of 1942. So this one has the original barrel, the original receiver that matches and everything like that. The only thing is it doesn't have clear inspector's initials here, but it does have the proof mark here on the bottom. You can see the P very slightly. Still has all the same nice milled parts. Now in 1942 is when they started to make changes to transition to the 03A3, but you'll see this one is still original 1903. If you looked at my collector's book and saw what they listed the differences, you wouldn't be able to notice them. So still has the ladder sight, still all the same hardware. The only difference being from the original 1900 design, there's no finger grooves in the stock, which I actually don't mind one way or the other. They're both really nice. They're interchangeable. You could take this stock and put it on an earlier 1903 Springfield or vice versa. So this one's in really good condition. This one's not as rare. There's 230 approximately thousand of these made, but you'd be hard pressed to find one that's probably not an Arsenal rebuild. So although this one isn't the best condition, I would say that it's probably better than a lot that you're going to find. And if you can find one of these that's marked with the Remington receiver, definitely check out to see what the bore wear is, have a bore muzzle gauge, and then check the barrel. Everything should be 1942 for the most part for these. So it's pretty easy to identify between the milled and the stamped parts. So it still has the high quality milled parts. But if you get one that's a little higher in receiver number, it may have some stamped parts and it may have some different cosmetic changes. But that's just because of where it's at in the production. So you see visually there's not a lot of difference between the two. That's because they're so close in serial number. One is towards the end of the original 1903, the top one, and then the 1903 Modified is at the beginning of the 1903 Modified. So you see the stock quality between the two is pretty comparable, but when you get into the finer details, you can clearly see the Arsenal rebuild parts and the markings that don't match. So the Remington stuff is all going to be marked with an R. It's pretty easy to see that this doesn't have it. It's probably a replacement piece. So you see here everything on the site marked with an R, everything here marked with an R also. On the bolt sleeve, same thing. Remington's really easy to differentiate because the parts markings are going to be an R, and then you'll even know if they're milled or stamped. So these are pretty easy to collect. If you see a Remington receiver, I'd take a second glance at it and see what it has. One is Arsenal rebuild, one is pretty original. Both are actually pretty rare. The one on the top more rare than the one on the bottom. But overall condition is pretty fair for both. I like these. These are some of the more rare 1903s that I have.